Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of pixelprojectradio. This is part 2 of our Parasite Eve coverage. If you haven't checked out the first episode, I do encourage you to do so. It was really, really cool. We got into a lot of the background information, some of the thematic ideas that this game deals with, although it's more of an entertainment story, let's be real. Once again, I am joined by Frank, who you might know better as Nomad from the fantastic podcast, the Retro Wildlands. Nomad, thanks for joining me again today, man. I'm excited to have you back.
I'm excited to be back. We had a really good time on the first episode talking Parasite Eve, so I'm really excited to go into the last half. And this is going to be a good time, man. Oh yeah,
I'm really excited. This game gets pretty wild in the last half. Before we begin, there's something that we, and by we I mean I neglected to bring up last time, and that is this notion of battle points in the game. That you get generally you get when you level up, and then sometimes when you beat some bosses. So I wanted to just clear what those are real fast before we begin. Battle points, they are kind of adjacent to experience points, but you will get, I don't know, let's say 300 whenever you beat a major boss. And you can use those in increments of 100 to strengthen your guns and armor. You can give them higher defense or attack, range, bullets, etc. You can also use them to improve your ATB bar and how fast that fills up, as well as giving you some extra item space. So you can do a lot of that. I will be perfectly honest with everybody. I didn't realize this was a thing until like day 5, which is good because that's when you start to really need it, I think. But once I did that, and once I started using the tools a little bit more to improve my weapons, I found that the difficulty of this game got much, much lower. I don't know if you feel the same way, man.
No, absolutely I do. And even when I was aware of the bonus point system, I purposely made it a point to save them up until near the end game. And while they weren't useful or anything like that, I think the game is so well balanced, in my opinion, that equipment that you would find never really necessitated you having to use your bonus points to buff them up or increase your ATB speed or anything like that. But once you decided to, and then you use the tools to manipulate different weapons and kind of make that signature build that you want to, it really opened up this entire experience, I think. So great to have, not necessary, but it was all right.
Yeah, for sure. Before I started using them, the difficulty, I wouldn't call it intense or anything, or even, I wouldn't even say it was difficult. It was crucial to manage when you were healing. Otherwise, 2 missteps and you're done. But once I started using all those battle points, it was significantly easier.
Night and day difference, for sure.
Definitely. So now that we talked a little bit about battle points, let's jump back in to where we left off in the story. We left off on day 2, right after the NYPD have their press conference, where Aya decides to tell the truth, much to everybody else's annoyance. We are heading out to the Museum of National History with Daniel to meet a doctor named Hans Klump. This guy is a standoffish prick, pretty much.
That is probably the best way you can describe this person. Absolutely.
Have you been to this museum?
I have not in real life. I have not, but I've always wanted to. It's definitely on mine and my wife's bucket list. We want to travel, do a little bit more of that, and we'll go there one day and see how accurate it looks.
Yeah, I'm the same. I haven't ever been. I would really love to go. It's, like you said, it's a bucket list kind of thing. But when we get there, we do end up meeting Dr. Clamp. He's really standoffish. And upon stepping into his research lab, it's like this little, it's kind of like a TA or an adjunct office. It's really not that big. But Aya has a flashback again, immediately, with the young girl. Clamp is there as the doctor. We don't know much more than that just yet. But once Aya's sort of back to reality, Clamp... Is it Clamp or Clamp? I want to say Clamp so bad, but Hans Clamp, it sounds German.
It's probably Clamp. I've always called him Clamp because that's just easier to roll off my tongue, but...
Yeah, I'm inevitably going to go back and forth. So, But he's pretty immediately kind of aggressive towards us, but he does explain his research. He's researching the mitochondria as a whole, and he lays it out on the table that the mitochondria has its own DNA, which is true. Like in real life, that's true. And he sort of explains that in theory, one mitochondria can produce a significant amount of energy. And if all of them in the body at once produced all of that energy, then spontaneous combustion would be extremely easy. This is not true, like in real life. And I think that's largely because, I read something about this, but mitochondria, they can produce heat, but they cannot burn, or they cannot sustain burning, or something to that effect. All in all, you're not going to spontaneously combust because of your mitochondria. So rest easy.
Yeah, it definitely rest easy. Although I will say the way this particular section is written and how they relay this information, I 100% believed that this could happen to me in real life. It relates to the actual science well enough, I thought. So kudos to that, at least. It helped enrich the universe at this point. It's like, oh, this thing could potentially really happen, although it can't.
Oh, totally. I can't remember if I mentioned this in the last episode, but anytime there's like real life information integrated into games, I always have this anxiety in the back of my head that's like, is this true or is this BS? No, I definitely mentioned this because I think I said the same thing last time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's written in a way that, you've just got to be along for the ride, man. I mean, if you come into this game trying to critique every bit of information in writing, you're going to have a bad time.
100%.
Klomp also mentions that the mitochondria mutate incredibly fast, which is also true. And this is where we learn about this phenomenon, or this notion that researchers found in the 80s called mitochondria Eve. They were able to trace back the origin of all human life to one woman in Africa. So Klomp is absolutely distraught to hear you say Eve. That's what the murderous monster called herself. He immediately gets quiet and he's like, all right, you've got to go. You got to get out of here. And when we do, we leave. On the way back, we get a call from the station regarding the case. So Daniel puts it into high gear and we speed on back there.
I will say real quick, if I didn't mention it last time, I really appreciate these scenes where Aya and Daniel are going back and forth via police car. It's never really forced in there in such a way. I'm having a hard time thinking of how I want to say this, but I like that it takes a break from the narrative, even though it's giving you more narrative deposition, if you will. But it's a great way to have them grow as characters together and interact with each other, and then get you to the next set piece. I always appreciated those.
It's part of the cinematic nature of this game, I think. This would be a transitional scene in a movie to sort of build development between the characters, let the audience get to know them a little more. I think it's great. I'm with you. It's really cool. So when we get back there, we learn that Melissa's solo performance in the park was canceled. I can't remember if we talked about this, but this is something that you read about in Melissa's diary in the very beginning. She had like a solo concert in the park, like a Pops concert. Happens all the time, but it's been canceled. But because this is pre-internet and, pre-widespread cell phones, people are still going there. They just don't know it's canceled. So we freak out, or I should say Daniel freaks out, because he realizes that his son Ben and his ex-wife Lorraine are going to that concert. So he runs off immediately. He's like, screw this protocol. I've got to help my family. And Lieutenant Baker is like, yeah, he's right. You should go look after him.
That's probably one of my favorite scenes, because it really... We understand that Daniel's definitely a family man, a father, when he has that first interaction with his son Ben that we talked about in our last episode, but now you get to see that in action, and that's exactly what it is. Screw you, Baker, I'm going to save my son. And he runs off, and Baker, of course, is just like, yeah, do what you gotta do, Aya, go back him up. And I really liked the passion that Daniel exhibited there, and it also translated to Aya as well. She cares enough as well, wants to go watch his back. So I like that scene.
Yeah, me too. It's really good. This takes us to our next location, which is Central Park. It's the real Central Park. It's, if you've ever been there, you'll be able to tell. It's a little sprawling though, and it's pretty easy to get turned around. The architecture in Central Park was designed this way, like in real life on purpose, to give you a sort of sense of, winding and maze-like, and, you can get lost. And you can definitely do that here too. You will see the ghost girl walking around here, and she serves as a guide for you, but if you choose to explore, you can get turned around pretty easily.
Yeah, I got lost quite a bit. It was fun for what it was. I enjoyed finding enemies and battling them and leveling up and finding some items, but anytime I think back on it, I can't think of a single thing that I found that was game-changing or really, really incentivized me to get lost. It was kind of frustrating. I was not super hot on Central Park as a whole, just from a level design, because I get lost easy in real life.
Yeah, I think I got lost more in the museum, which we'll talk about when we get there, but Central Park was a little confusing. Daniel can't go in with you. He tries to approach, but his sleeve catches on fire. So, which does make me question how the general audience got in there, but I'm suspending my disbelief just to enjoy the narrative. So we've got to navigate Central Park to get to the theater. You'll fight all of the zoo animals here as enemies. They're all mutated and they've escaped. The monkeys, man, the monkeys got me. They've got these boomerangs that can cover the whole screen practically.
Yeah, they were wild. And this kind of harks back to where sometimes how the camera's positioned in these pre-rendered background settings can kind of be difficult to manage when you're trying to move Aya around. Because there'd be times, and I'm sure it happened to you too, where you're like, I'm positioned in such a way where this thing's going to go right around me, and you still get blasted in the face anyway. They're tough.
Yeah, it takes some getting used to. It's limitation of the hardware partly, and then partly game design. I don't know. Again, I wasn't at this point using battle points, and I did okay. So you'll probably do okay too if you're playing along. We find Eve in the theater, and we find the audience all there too. She is giving this monologue saying how she will no longer be a host, but in control. Humans are weak, the mitochondria is strong, etc. And we get a pretty cool CG cutscene here of the entire audience just liquidating. Like they just melt, and you see the bile and bodily fluids and biomass like leaking out of people's legs and eyes, and it's really cool, and it all sort of congeals and combines into this mass. So we need to stop Eve because we can't let this happen. So we run backstage, and this starts a chase with Eve. This also is the first time during some of these dramatic moments regarding Eve that we get this really cool organ music. It happens a lot throughout. It's really good. It's really atmospheric.
Yeah, it's going just right back to Yoko Shimomura's amazing work in this entire game. The music is perfectly placed and accentuates all the different moods and feelings it's trying to get out of you as a player in those moments. Anytime Aya and Eve were on the same screen together, these tones were used just perfectly and always made my heart race. I was captivated every time. Still am.
Yeah, especially towards the end too. We get more of the organ music, and we get some really cool chase music. The soundtrack to this is just so good. I really can't say that enough. So we need to chase down Eve. You're going to be going through Central Park. You're going to be fighting more enemies. There's a mini boss or two. But when we do finally catch up to Eve, this is one of the more weird scenes in the game where it was a little tough to suspend that disbelief. We catch up to Eve, and she's next to a horse and carriage. And, we're trying to get information out of her, and she says, come on, let's go for a ride. And we say yes.
Yeah, that always struck me as odd. Eve is touting world domination and nucleic domination and all of that, but then just casually says, come with me, and we do. And I always tried to rationalize it that these two are connected in some way. We still don't exactly know why, so I felt just compelled to try to understand why. So I think that's why I did it as a player, but even then, it's like, nah, I'd probably just be like, let's do something different, Eve. Can we just talk this out here, please?
Yeah, I mean, if you've gone through the game as we have, you can make a lore connection as to why this might have happened. it's still one of those things where it's like story tropey nonsense that you have to accept. I think for me, the Occam's razor of it all, the most obvious or simplest solution is probably it, is just that she's got plot armor and she's a protagonist. She's using protagonist brain right now. You know what I mean?
Yep, 100%. That would be nice to equip in-game as well. I'm sure the stats are fantastic.
That'd be nice to equip in real life as well. Get rid of my dumb brain. So we jump on and go for a ride with Eve. The horse immediately catches on fire and just tears off down New York, down the streets of New York, I meant to say. And it's this crazy chase scene, this crazy chase sequence. The horse is going so fast. Eve is kind of floating along with us, and we get to converse with her a little bit. She's asking why Aya is siding with the humans and not with her. And at first, this doesn't make a ton of sense. This is also where a fight begins with her, with Eve. It's not difficult, but there is next to no space to move, which is a little tough.
Yeah, there's one specific attack I remember her using where she drops like this energy bomb directly onto the carriage itself, and you have to watch for this cue before it erupts, and you have to put Aya like in the deepest corner, one of the four corners of the carriage, to avoid taking damage. And it's unless you play the game a few times, you miss that almost every time, I feel like. So yeah, it felt very claustrophobic, although I felt the fight as a whole was cool from a presentation standpoint. I mean, back of a carriage with a horse that's on fire, it's a great set piece, but it was it was unique for sure.
Yeah, it's very cool. This game is not preoccupied with a major theme, although they kind of try to shoehorn one in at the very end. It's not chasing a theme. It's not chasing verisimilitude. It's just an entertaining sci-fi thriller, And this scene does a great job of that. It's atmospheric. It's really intense. After the fight, we don't kill Eve, obviously, but she decides that she's done with us, and she says, "It seems you still don't know who I am. Well, if you don't know, your mitochondria will. That's why you were drawn to the opera." At this point, Eve tries to get us to join with her. It's unclear what she's trying to do, but she has Aya knocked over. She's descending upon her, but the horse and carriage crash. So Eve is kept at bay for a little longer. Aya has another flashback. It's the same as before. And that kind of draws this scene to a close. Really cool one. Really cool one. Definitely a scene. I think this might be a scene that I would show somebody if I was trying to get them to play it. I would show them the CG of the rat transforming, or Shiva, the dog, and then this one.
Yeah, I think this one would probably be the one that I would show off too. The graphics look fantastic. Everything's rendered exceptionally well, but it gives us a good idea of, even without words, kind of who these characters are, sort of that they're struggling, connected in some way. And this scene ends very ominously, of course, with the screen, of course, fading to black, and Aya's fate is unknown. So that alone would want me to jump into this experience and understand, what the hell did I just watch and where are we going from here?
Absolutely. That scene does fade to black, as you said, and we cut back to Daniel. Ben has run back. They're still outside of the park. He keeps saying that mommy was acting weird. This is a really sweet moment. Ben asked Lorraine and Daniel both to come to this concert so they could all spend a little time together as a family, which is really true. Like, kids will do that. It's very touching. But he keeps saying mommy was acting weird. Mommy was acting weird. And then it's implied that she was part of the crowd, that when the liquidation happened, she met the same fate. So Lorraine, at this point, is dead.
Yeah, it's a sad moment too, especially because Ben's trying to be he is so innocent about it, and he just wants to bring the family together for a little bit. But now it's fairly obvious, I would think, to the player at this point that that's not the last we're going to see of this pile of goo. It exited stage left. It has a higher purpose, and now Lorraine is part of that. Daniel is more connected to this story now than he was before. He's no longer just Aya's partner, sidekick, or whatever. He's just as invested in some ways with this entire narrative, and I loved that.
Another little touch too, and this might be me giving too much credit to the game. I might be bringing my own analysis to this. But Daniel he doesn't get time to dwell on this. So he does not let out any emotion. He's just like, we've got things at hand. I can feel later. Right now, we need to make sure that none of us are dying here. And then we can feel later. Because if we die here, we're not going to be feeling anything.
Too true.
So this scene fades to black again. It cuts us back to the station. All of Manhattan is getting evacuated. So like we both said last time, this game actually takes this premise seriously. Nobody's trying to sell you potions on the street. Daniel explains to Ben that he needs to find Aya. He needs to go away a little bit more. But Kathy, this policewoman, she's going to look after Ben. And she takes Ben to see Shiva the police dog. And they linger on this moment for a little bit. They show them walking up, interacting, because this will be important pretty soon.
Yeah, it's very obvious we're going to be seeing this scene again, and we're going to be revisiting Shiva at some point down the future as well. It was almost a little haunting when I saw it for the very first time. It was very foreshadowy, but we'll get there in time.
Absolutely. We're going to just push through some of the rest of this to get to day 3. This is where we meet a Japanese scientist for the first time, Maeda. He is on the streets with 3 policemen. They're kind of hassling him to get out of here. The city's being evacuated. Maeda doesn't speak English super well. And preposterously, one of the big, fat New York American cops is just like, oh, you speak Japanese? Oh, Nihonji desu ka? And then it's like, what? That wouldn't happen. But at any rate, one of the cops is like, hey, if you can't speak the language, get out of this country. And then he just immediately spontaneously combusts. It's pretty good. The Japanese man, Maeda, he's nonplussed by this. He doesn't even react. He's like, oh, yes, this makes sense. And he uses this as a way to get out of there.
I loved watching the scene specifically for that. I mean, part of me enjoyed watching that one cop kind of get his comeuppance, as it were. But
yeah,
what you said just there always stuck with me too, that Maeda, when he saw this man combust, showed no reaction whatsoever, like he's seen this before. And then all of a sudden, this dorky scientist who can barely speak a lick of English well is the key to something. He knows what's going on, and I'm very curious about this character now.
Yeah, he's a cool character. Some folks get frustrated with how meek he comes off as. I read it less as being meek and more of him, not speaking the language like a native, just based on how he breaks up his speech patterns. But he could be meek too. We see that actually at the very, very end. He's a shy guy, we'll say.
Mm-hmm.
But Aya wakes up in his apartment. A total dump with a trash can fire in the middle of the room is how I described it in my notes. This is where we learn his name. He is Kunihiko Maeda. He's a scientist from Japan. He's the one that called earlier about the Mito who's it, what's it. Daniel is here too. This is just continuing Daniel coming out of nowhere into the scene. Happens throughout the entire game. Everybody in Manhattan at this point is gone, including all of the civilians, everybody but the police. And Maeda tells us that a similar thing happened in Japan just some years ago. A scientist's wife was involved in a car crash and tried to culture her liver cells the scientist tried to culture his wife's liver cells to keep her alive, and he called these cells Eve. The liver cells multiplied, and the mitochondria ended up taking over her physical body. That specimen then tried to give birth by getting the scientist's sperm.
Yep, so sperm reference 1 out of 37 to come.
We learn that the wife was a registered organ donor as well, and after the accident, her kidneys were transplanted into a young girl. So we're getting the breadcrumbs laid out. It's in retrospect, it's super obvious. I can't remember if I put it together at this point or not. But Maeda came over to the U.S. straight away once he heard that this was happening. And it's at this point that Aya as a character is kind of cool because she puts stuff together before I think the players do, but she never info dumps. She has these moments where like here, for example, she starts to worry that she might be more like Eve, and she's worried about hurting people, and she wants people to get away from her. And at this point, it's clear that Aya is forming her own theories about the story, just like we might be. But she's not. The writers aren't holding her hands and having her spell it out just yet. They do eventually, but not yet.
I appreciated this scene specifically because of that. Aya's trying to figure this whole mystery out like we are, and I think we're coming to certain conclusions that maybe she is, or maybe she is not, but I enjoyed the fact that she kind of lets this get to her in such a way where she doesn't know what to do with the information. She's scared, she's worried at what could possibly be. And I mentioned it in our last episode, but this is one of those scenes where I really started to appreciate Aya as a character because of these moments of vulnerability. And I think this whole scene was really well done with that.
I do really like this scene. I still don't think I still don't think I'm not as hot on her as you might be as a character, but I do think some of her character moments are very cool. Like here. This day actually closes out with Aya wondering to herself. She says, "When I touched Eve, was it Maya? But Maya died in the car crash with Mom." And I think this might be the first time we hear Maya's name. I think
so. I think you're right. I don't remember hearing her mentioned ever before.
But this day fades out, and we're now on to day 3 out of 6, selection. So, when we exit the apartment, Maeda is still outside. He just waited there all night. The two of you plus Daniel are going to essentially pillage the stores that are left over. You go to the pharmacy, you go to the gun supply store. You're just taking whatever you need, and you're off. It's pretty cool. You all get into the police car. Daniel says, everybody's gone. Road rules don't apply anymore. So he just fucking rips. It's great.
I love it. I did want to ask you too. At this point, when I got here, it was awesome raiding the pharmacy, finding all the hidden items in the background and the stock room and stuff, and then going to the gun shop and everything. But at this point, I had next to no inventory space, and I was freaking out, thinking we'd never be back to this location again. And I think that's the first time Aya's limited inventory really started to rear its ugly head.
Yeah, I don't know if I had that thought here. I definitely had it. I just can't remember if it was here specifically. There are a lot of hidden items here that you can pick up, and I think I did forego some of them because I knew my inventory was full, and there wasn't anything at the time that I wanted to get rid of. We're going back to the research quote unquote lab in the museum because Maeda wants to test something. He found this gel-like substance from Aya's clothing that he believes to belong to Eve. So we slap it into a microscope, and we get this very 90s cutscene where we're zooming into the DNA, and we're seeing all these cells doing cell things. And what we see is Eve's cells taking over the nucleus to another cell. They're Eve's because they're spiky and they look like they're mean. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, very, very obvious. I appreciate it. Oh, even the sound effects, too, with the different things floating around the nuclei and all that. Very 90s, as you say.
It's very cool. It's very cool. Aya then asks to have her own cells examined, and we get the same thing. We see the same things, but instead of the cells being taken over, the nucleus being taken over, I should say, by Eve's mitochondria, Jeez, that's going to happen so much. Aya's cells kind of force them off. So Aya is different somehow. Maeda confirms this. He says, yeah, your mitochondria are protecting your nucleus from Eve's parasites. And he cites Dawkins' selfish gene theory at this point. And what that essentially is that biology will do whatever it can to survive, which is a really bold choice for the writers, because they then go on to say, the characters themselves question, well, if that's the case, why did any of this happen at all? And Maeda says, I don't know.
Always makes me chuckle, but whatever. The plot has to go on, so.
Yeah. But surprise, surprise, it turns out our good friend Dr. Clamp did not evacuate. He's still here. And, he immediately launches into like, this is all, of course, the corrupt cops would do this. The police are the ones that are the bad guys. It's pretty funny. But he takes a look at the cells in the microscope and he immediately freaks out a little bit. He clearly knows more than he's letting on. He's demanding to know what these are. He pinpoints immediately what's happening to Aya. He's like, these are your cells, right? You must be feeling a little hot. Is that correct? And you might be losing consciousness. Is that right? And, we think this might be going somewhere, but Daniel gets sidetracked a little bit. He sees this list on the computer screen. It is, I don't think we learn what this is right now. It's an organ donor list, basically, an HLA, like a organ donor compatibility kind of thing. But he sees Ben and Lorraine's name on that list. So he immediately freaks out. He grabs Clamp by the neck and like lifts him up, Mortal Kombat style. And he's so pissed. And, obviously Clamp kicks us out, right? I mean, obviously. And as we leave, he mutters to himself that it's too late at this point.
Yeah, it's very interesting, the whole scene, really. Part of me, though, I loved what Daniel did, and I don't know if I made the comparison last episode or not, but before I played Parasite Eve as a kid, I was hot off Final Fantasy VII, so when I saw Daniel, I saw Barrett, and I saw kind of Barrett's attitude come through when Daniel was taking it to Clamp here, but I remember leaving that scene, though, even when I was little, thinking, yeah, he knows a lot more than what he's letting on, and this mystery just continues to get thicker.
I am glad that they didn't lean into the stereotype that they did with Barrett, with Daniel here. I love Barrett as a character, but he very much is like the angry big black guy, like Mr. T stereotype. And, again, he's a cool character, but it's, looking back, it's a bit much.
I would unfortunately agree. I love you, Daniel.
Yeah, Daniel's really great. I love Daniel throughout this entire game. On the ride back to the station, Maeda tells us that the list is for organ donating to see, who matches what and etc. But when we get back to the station, it is just torn asunder. There are parasite monsters everywhere inside. Eve has clearly been here. And this is the first point in the game that Maeda will hold us up. He'll say, wait, take this. And he gives us a good luck charm. So in my notes, what I wrote was, Maeda gives us the first of a few good luck charms here. Do these do anything? Having finished the game now, I think this was really clever. I love what they did with this. It's I don't want to say subtle because it's not, but it's just a tiny thing, but I think it's really cool. I can't wait to reveal it once we get to the end.
Yeah, I really appreciated this whole dynamic here, and it's funny. I'm sure people that have played this game before have theories on what these things do or how they impact gameplay, and there's theories abound. So this was a great little touch.
So we're walking around the office. Everybody is either dead or dying, and they confirm, like, yeah, Eve was here. You need to take care of this. And we learn that Ben, when he went to see Shiva, the police dog, Shiva went berserk. So we see several cutscenes of Ben chasing Shiva throughout here, and we kind of have to follow up with them to make sure that Ben's okay. We do eventually run into them. We see a cutscene of Baker sort of protecting Ben as Shiva transforms and mutates. This, to me, I think this might be my favorite cutscene in the whole game. The way that they animate this dog transforming, like you see its skull split open and it's like its legs start to grow more than what its skin can allow. So it tears, the tail splits into two. It is really, really cool. The first time I saw this, I immediately sent it to a friend that I'm trying to play this game. And I was like, dude, like this is the best the PlayStation has to offer in terms of CG graphics. This is incredible.
Yeah, it was almost too incredible when I was little. I always I've always had a soft spot for just dogs in general. And once I realized what was happening to Shiva, like I remember getting just anxious following through with the story. And then watching Shiva transform. Yes, the animations were so well done, and the power of the PlayStation, these knobs were dialed up to 11 with how it all looked. But I was still just watching this unfold, and I was mortified. But once it was finished and we had to do battle, I was more than happy to put this creature out of its misery, because wow, that was intense.
Did you have trouble with this boss fight with mutated Shiva?
A little bit. I felt like Shiva's attack patterns, they weren't random, but I had a hard time telegraphing what the next move would be until I did the boss battle a couple different times. And I felt like I was underleveled at that point, because anytime I would get hit by its big super laser beam of death that it would shoot out of its snout, I feel like I would lose a ton of health there. So I struggled a couple times, yeah.
I don't think I struggled with the boss per se, but this was the boss where I decided that machine guns were not going to be something I would ever use in this game. Because machine guns, I don't think we explained this, machine guns have a special trait to them where they fire randomly. Like, they fire more than most guns, but they fire randomly. And since Shiva has 3 heads, sort of like a Cerberus, yeah, you don't get to choose. And it was not the move for this fight. So actually, yeah, I think forever on after this, I stuck to one gun and I just updated the shit out of it as I went along.
Yeah, I don't know if every machine gun has that random rate of fire, but at the same time, though, if you have a tool, you can. What I did is I took that random rate of fire ability and moved it onto a weapon I didn't want to use just to get it off, but I lost a tool in the process that way. But even then, when you can tell what target you want to shoot at and expend your ammo on, I never cared for the machine guns. I was more of a handgun and a rifle person myself. I had one of the two at all times.
Yeah, I think I stuck with a handgun, for no real reason. It was just there. But this boss fight ends and we get just a moment of respite before it fades out and we move on to day 4, Conception. So Daniel is in charge now, which implies Baker died here, right, from his wounds?
I never got the impression that he died. I felt that he was so wounded that he couldn't continue with his duties, but now that I think about it, I don't think we ever get any more mention of Baker from this point on in the rest of the game, so maybe it's up to interpretation.
Yeah, I'm really not sure. I wrote that I was unsure when I was playing, and now that I've finished it, I don't think anybody ever mentions Baker again. So it could be either. I mean, he could just be, where would he get treatment, though? There are no doctors.
That's a good point. So, I don't know. Wherever you are, Baker, I hope you're alive.
He's holed up in one of those garbage can fire apartments, just laying low.
Yeah, exactly.
So Daniel and Aya go up to the lab to talk to Maeda. Maeda points out that the attack, he thinks anyway, that the attack on the station was just a distraction because Eve knows that the nearby hospital houses sperm samples. Her body can't last as long anymore, and she wants to give birth to the ultimate being, exactly what happened in Japan. So that's our next step. We're going off to the hospital. In the car ride over, Maeda tells us that this ultimate being was born in Japan, but it died, along with the scientist that was the father. This is where he says that the mitochondria DNA from the father didn't connect to that of the mother. This, which was Eve, by the way. This sent me off to do some very basic Google searching. And technically, mitochondrial DNA is inherited exclusively from the mother in almost all mammals. But I did find some studies from 2019-ish that said it is possible to have mitochondrial DNA from the fathers. Listen, I am 30 or 40 years old with a full-time job. I can't do biology research for this podcast. I don't know how true or how likely any of that is. I'm just saying what I found.
Well, you certainly did a lot more research than I did, especially nowadays. I just think everything that happens in this game is truth, and that's all there is to it. So props to you, my friend.
It's really interesting. I wonder, I bet if Dave listens to this, Dave Jackson, with his biology background, he probably will have some thoughts, and I look forward to seeing those in the Discord. If any of you want to, chime in and tell me that I'm a big dum-dum that doesn't know science, please, by all means, just do it in the Discord.
Yeah, come on over to the Discord. Let's talk mitochondria and sperm.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to make a whole channel for it. It's great. It's going to be an adult channel, though. You have to 18 plus. I also wrote at this point, you're just going to have to enjoy the ride here when it comes to the story. I wrote that several times throughout here, but it's fun. It's fun. So we go to the hospital to chase down Eve. And this is where I think this is the most instances in the game where we see this little ghost girl, Maya, the blonde-haired one. We are going to be chasing her throughout this whole hospital constantly.
When we first got to the hospital, my mind immediately went to the ghost girl because I made the assumption, and we'll learn the correct assumption, that these flashbacks that we're seeing are happening in this hospital. And we're again brought here for not just the reason to stop Eve from procuring the sperm and birthing the ultimate being, but there's more to Aya's flashbacks, and we're going to learn a lot about that here.
Oh, yeah. It's really cool. We take an elevator just to get around in here, and it plummets immediately, and the power starts to go off. We can also hear Eve. She's like sort of taunting us. So she's somehow manipulating the power structure to give us a hard time. So we need to hunt down several fuses, use key cards to get all around this area, because ultimately what we want to do is find the sperm that's being held there and turn off the liquid nitrogen that is keeping it cooled to keep it fresh, to keep it biologically viable. And we do eventually get to that point. There is a doctor that is remaining in here who is treating one patient who runs away. It's very funny. The doctor gives us explanations on where the sperm bank is, how to turn off the liquid nitrogen preservation system, and all the while we are seeing Aya and Maya as little ghostly, Shining-esque twins running around here.
It still continues to compound the mystery as to what's happening here. More than anything, I was vested in trying to stop Eve and save humanity and all that, but I really, really wanted to know what the fuck was going on at this point. And I think the ghostly apparitions do a great job of not just invoking that out of the player, but they're great guides. They kept things on pace. I always knew where I had to go, and I think the hospital area on this day is probably one of my favorite locations in the entire game, if not my favorite location in the game.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that in retrospect. I think I would agree. It's not so big that you get lost. Those, like you said, the two apparitions kind of help keep you on track. And this is where we learn a ton of really interesting information about the game and about the story. And speaking of that, actually, we find some of this information in the form of documents. And here's what we learn. We learn that Clomp was on the preservation staff, the sperm preservation staff, at the hospital. I have no idea if that's what they're called. That's what I wrote, and I don't know why I wrote it, but that's what it is. We find that HLA list, the same one that Clomp had on his computer, and we find records for Aya's mom and Maya, but Maya's records have been torn out, so we don't know where they are. And we find Melissa Pierce's records too, the current host of Eve. We learn that Maya and Melissa were in the hospital together and operated on during the same day. So this is where the pieces are all starting to come together.
Yeah, there's still a lot more questions that need to be answered here, but it was a nice carrot on the stick for me as a player, I think, because you still didn't quite understand what it really all meant, but you could see the connection starting to become a little bit more clearer.
Yeah, and to be honest, too, even having completed the story and watched, several reviews of the game, my story knowledge is still very much not in focus. But I don't think ultimately that's not the point of this game. It's not, it's not trying to deliver this monumental literary narrative. It's just a fun sci-fi horror game. I've said it once, I've said it a million times, and that's not me like trying to say, well, any criticism you have of this game is invalid because it's just fun. I'm not saying that. I'm just more so saying, like, approach this game on its own level and you're going to have way more fun than if you approach it expecting something completely different.
Agreed. And I think really at the end of the day, man, that's the secret sauce that is Parasite Eve. Period.
That's the secret sauce. The secret sauce. After all the sperm talk, man, you had to use that one.
Oh, I didn't even know I was doing that. How awful.
Secret sauce of life, man. I mean, approaching things on their level and like not having expectations that will screw you over. I mean, that's one of the secrets to a good life, I think.
Amen.
So this has been Life Talks with Pixelprojectradio. You have to subscribe extra to get all of them. That can be at Patreon. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just being a silly little guy today. So, reeling the silliness in. We get a cutscene here after we look at all these documents of the Navy. And I didn't know that the Navy's had control over fighter jets, but this is de facto the Navy. They say it in the game. They're sending fighter jets to Manhattan to help fight Eve. They're not messing around. It's they're taking this all very seriously. And this transitions us up to the rooftop. We get into another mini boss battle here. This was the first one that really, really aggravated me. This mini boss. It's for two reasons. One, this whole area highlights how slowly you move because the boss is huge, the rooftop is huge, and Aya is small, and she moves quite slow. Which in and of itself is only a little annoying. But the spider, this like spider boss thing, has a special move where it shoots spider webs. And we saw these. I mean, the game taught us how to avoid these in the hospital. But this mini boss's spider webs, they're gigantic. And if you hit them, you get damage, but then you also are frozen. It's just, man, this boss gave me a headache.
Yeah, I don't want to use the verbiage unfair, but I'm going to use the verbiage unfair here. Because the way this battle system is set up is so long as you're cognizant of your surroundings and you're constantly moving, you've got a great chance of avoiding damage and coming out on top practically unscathed. But with this particular boss, while I loved the gravitas of this particular boss and I thought the Spider Lady's design was exceptional, it didn't matter how much you moved. There were times where when it shot those 3 webs out, you're getting hit whether you like it or not, and you're not getting free fast enough before it shoots that fireball thing at you, and then you're going to take additional follow-up damage. And it gave me that illusion or that thought of now you don't have complete control and you're going to get hit. And I found that as annoying as you did, for sure.
Thankfully, though, I mean, once you do enough damage to this, the spider boss, and by the way, I agree, the design on this is super cool. Once you do enough damage to it, it kind of just falls through a hole in the floor. There's a lot of hole falling in this game.
Yeah, I don't quite understand how it happened, but whatever. You gotta have the boss expire in a very climactic... You have to have the boss expire in a very cinematic sort of way, and that's how it was done. I like it.
Once that happens, Eve confronts us here. And basically, she confirms that our suspicions were correct. She wants to give birth to the ultimate being. She doesn't want to make the same mistake that her sister did years ago in Japan. And this is a cool little moment. Aya says, "You're not my..." And then Eve cuts her off. "You finally caught on, huh?" And this is where we get another cutscene here. Eve makes the fighter jet pilot's innards sort of melt out of them, and they just crash into each other. It's really wild, and she ties it up by saying, "You've just witnessed the limitations of humans." And I did make a note here. I know you've got something to say. I just want to get this out here. All the while this is happening, the background music is just a sotto voce opera singer. Sotto voce means solo voice. It is just an opera singer. It's very eerie. It's there's not a key center that's set up clearly, so it's just a sort of... it's a lost aria, an aria without its accompaniment. It's very creepy. It's very cool.
I never really fully appreciated this, I think, when I was younger, but having listened to this older now and having listened to the soundtrack and how it uses opera vocalizations up to this point, this is, in my opinion, the best use of it in the entire game, even for as simple as it is, because it really accentuates this idea that, just like Eve got done saying, you finally caught on now. Well, me as the player, I have not caught on at this point, but there's something dark here that's happening, and this opera perfectly accentuates this scene. Just perfect.
The sotto voce motif of the opera singer is thematically linked to Eve, and it's appropriate because when we think of an aria in an opera, it is one organism, the soloist, singing around accompaniment, around harmony, around an orchestra. But here, that's been plucked out, and it's just that on its own. It's not dissimilar to a lone mitochondria, right? That has a lot of power, just like a soloist has a lot of power, but without the supporting stuff around it, it's not, it's not the same. So I think it's a brilliant choice here. I mean, Shimomura is the hero of this game. She's just amazing.
Absolutely.
And can't wait to hear more of her in Super Mario RPG Remake.
Yes, couple more months.
This is a weird little part of the game. There's another jet that's going to crash into the roof. So we've got to get out of here. You can hear the jet coming, like in the sound, the sound of the jet approaching the building, which is a really nice touch. I'm pretty sure you can take too long and die here. Is that true?
That is absolutely true. You want to know why I know that? Because it happened to me.
I knew it before you even said it. I didn't use a guide for this part, so I wasn't sure where to go. I thought that I was going to fail this, but if you walk south enough, you find one of those... what do they call it? The things that like window washers and painters will ride up on, like on a building, up scaffolding.
Yeah, I can't think of the proper term, but I think you described it well enough.
Yeah, you find one of those and you hop onto it. The brakes or the pulleys give out, so you're plummeting, and you have to do a couple of fights on this thing. But you do end up, you fall to the bottom relatively unscathed, or unscathed enough to get away. And yeah, the jet does crash into the roof, but you and Daniel get out of there. And on the car ride back, Daniel lets you in on some info he found. Years ago, a doctor was fired from the hospital for giving out an HLA list, and he thinks it might be Clamp. Up until now, Clump has always... Clump? No, it's definitely not Clump. We know it's not Clump. Up until now, Clamp's... what do you call it? Justification for working in a museum as like a PhD, like a medical doctor, has been that he just doesn't like people. But it's clear at this point that that's not the whole story. Daniel also found out that Melissa, aka Eve, was seen going into the museum late at night on several occasions. So this ties Clamp into this de facto without a doubt.
Yeah, if there was any doubt at this point, it's gone. I always thought it was odd, too, kind of a small aside, that he was able to do mitochondrial research in a pretty well done up lab in the museum of all places, but I digress.
That's what I'm saying, man. It literally looks like an adjunct's office or like a TA. Like I was an adjunct and I was a teaching assistant, and our offices weren't much bigger than that. It just, he has a microscope and a couple other pieces of fancy equipment, but he's somehow doing mad scientist shit. But anywho's, this leads us into the longest day of the game by far. Day 5, Evolution. So Evolution. This is day 5. This is where you're able to do an optional dungeon, quote unquote. You can go to the warehouse here. Since it's optional, we're just going to kind of breeze through it, but I did it. I did not know it was optional. The main thing you get through there is experience points. If you want to grind a little, you get some good loot, and you fight, this awful crab boss that drove me bananas.
Yeah, this crab boss was very unique to this side quest, so if you're a completionist in any sorts and want to get experience and all that, definitely go into the warehouse. You'll have a fun time. And what I mean by fun time is dying repeatedly and having to restart that section over and over again. The crab boss was certainly a challenge. It would circle the screen, it would throw out these bubbles that would encase a good portion of the screen, and it dealt a lot of damage. And now that I'm thinking about it, if you get hit with these bubbles, I think it gives you a defense down status effect as well. So that if you get hit again, you're pretty much done at that point. But if you come out the victor, you will have earned it. That is for sure.
It's also the first boss, I'm pretty sure, that has a move that will always leave you with 1 HP. We see that come in again with the final boss as well. But I didn't, so I'm proud to say I didn't die a single time throughout this whole game. When I did die, I had revives, so technically didn't count. But I blew through my entire inventory on this crab boss. Every last bit of it. It is what it is, you know?
At least you came, you saw, you conquered, and came out a little bit better for it.
The first thing that we do on this day is we go to Chinatown, actually. And Maeda finds this open manhole with what he describes as rotten meat all around it / in it. So obviously we've got to check it out. This is another sewer level. Hooray.
Yay.
This level, I got lost in this a lot.
Yeah, this level layout, if you take a bird's eye view down on it, I think it's fairly simple. It's just a bunch of crossroads sections over and over until you find your endpoint. But when you're going through it, it's very easy to lose yourself. I'll go straight this time. No, I'll go left, or I'll go right. Oh, a dead end. And I hate this part of the game with a passion, and more so the enemies that are in this section. These bats that'll fly around that'll shoot like a sonar wave. Yeah. They shoot the sonar wave that when it hits you, it causes blindness. So when you open up your wireframe attack dome to try to fire off your weapon, it is so small, there is no way you're going to hit anything. And unless you have some curatives on you, you're going to have to wait for this effect to expire. And that's annoying.
Well, the frustrating thing to me about this is it's long enough to be very annoying in the fight, but it's not so long that it makes sense to use a curative. I mean, it goes away pretty quickly, but it's long enough to make the battles really drawn out. So whenever you fight 4 of these goddamn bats, you could, I mean, it never happened to me, but theoretically you could just get stuck in a loop where you just get blinded over and over again.
Yeah, you're right. That's a good point, too. That the status doesn't last that long, so you're kind of in this tug and pull of, do I use it or do I wait? And some of the sections you go through are very small enclosed tunnels, not the big crossroads section. And if there's one on either side of you, you may as well just put the controller down and wait until they fly in a different direction and give you an opening, because otherwise you won't have one.
Oh, before we get back to the story, I know I don't mean to go on too many tangents. This is the time in the game when I realized that your damage output, whether you're doing 1 shot, 2 shots, 3 shots, or 4, which is one of Dr. Seuss's lesser known titles, it's always going to be the same. Like if you go from 3 to 2, you're going to do the same net damage. It's just with 3, you get 3 shots of 2, 4, 6. With 2, you get 2 shots of 30. So here I permanently changed my weapon to have only 2 shots. Partly because the net damage is still the same, but also partly because the longer I stand still, that is a huge risk where enemies can hit you, especially if there are multiple enemies you're not engaging with. Those other ones can hit you as you are reloading, as you're taking another shot. So, pro tip from me, 1 or 2 shots. Do not go more than that.
Yeah, I did the same thing. I can't remember when I realized the same thing as well, but at most I would put 3 shots on my weapon. But yeah, 2 is kind of that sweet spot. Another thing too, I don't remember if we mentioned it last episode or not, I is working with firearms, so they have a finite amount of ammunition in their magazine, and if she has to reload, she'll automatically do that, and you can't move or cancel out of this, and if you're in the middle of commands, she'll stop, reload, and then pick up where she left off. So by shooting less bullets, you have less opportunity for that to happen, so it's just wins all around.
Yeah, it's this is not a perfect mechanic system, but it is fun to play around in. So, yeah, don't try more shots does not equal better here. But anywho's it. While we eventually find in the sewers, we find this. I don't know what this room would be called in a sewer system, but it's like an open area where like some areas let out into, and we find all of the biomass from the Central Park concert. Aya immediately recognizes this as the biomass from the Central Park concert. It took me, her telling me, I wouldn't have got there immediately, but hey, whatever. It gloops together and sort of like turns into a sentient ball of goo, of people parts, soylent green prior to being, fed to us. And it falls into the reservoir. So we need to get it out of there before it infects the whole city. But luckily for us, the control room is right next door. So the slime, we hit the control, we hit the buttons, we do the thing. The slime gets evacuated, but not before destroying a hefty portion of the sewer. So to get out of here, you've got to do some parkouring. You're going to be fighting monsters along the way, and etc. So you realize on your way out that Eve is heading to the museum. So that is where we are off to next.
I had a thought, and I lost it.
That's okay.
Never mind. Carry on.
Okay. All right. This is also where I did the warehouse, just by the way. But now we're off to the museum.
And we're off to disc 2, I believe. This is where we change discs at this point, right?
Yes. Thank you. This is a 2-disc game. I almost forgot to mention that. Yeah, it makes sense to put the disc change in the middle of the absolute longest day possible.
Yeah, I always appreciated the fact that this game was on 2 discs, but I always felt like you could have just crammed a little bit more on disc 1. We're practically at the end here, but either way.
I'm glad they didn't, because that ultimately what that would have led to, I think, would have been lower quality music and less cutscenes. And that's like 2 of the greatest strengths of this game. Plus, double disc cases look cool. I like them a lot.
Okay, you got me on all points there. I agree. I just never liked getting off my couch, but that's me.
Yeah. I had to do that. I mentioned this. I played this physically. I changed discs for the first time in decades, and it felt good. I'm looking at it on my shelf right now. It looks good. Handsome, clean.
Awesome. I might be a little jealous. I don't have my original physical copy anymore, so you take care of that, sir.
Oh, I'm trying. So we go to the museum, and inside we are constantly going to be catching glimpses of Klomp walking deeper and deeper into the building. So we're kind of chasing him throughout, and we're also fighting dinosaurs. Eve can just bring back dinosaurs from skeletons to parasite dinosaurs. I gotta be honest, I have a love-hate relationship with this area, but fighting the dinosaurs is really, really cool.
It is, and at this point, yeah, she's bringing back dinosaurs, but what do you keep saying? We're just gonna go along for the ride, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed fighting the dinosaurs myself, and I think this goes back to the first time I played it. I still felt like I was under-leveled or I wasn't tweaking my weapons right. The dinosaurs, for me, were hard as balls, and I never really found myself in a situation where I was about to die or did die, but I felt like the battles took a while. They took more hits than they should have, but after a while, though, you start to level up pretty quick in this area, too, I think.
Yeah, a lot of leveling to be done here, especially because you'll probably be fighting lots of enemies. This place can be a little confusing. The museum also has this weird system where you can answer trivia questions about science and biology to get like extra ammo and weapons and such.
It was interesting to me. It kind of incentivized you for paying attention to those science talks that you would have, but nice touch.
Yeah. we do eventually see Eve in here, and she is pregnant. Eve has been pregnant. She is pregante. And shortly after this, we see how she controls things when the biomass slime overtakes a literal T-Rex skeleton, and you can see it like growing that putrid, hellish flesh that characterizes the parasite monsters. It's really, really cool, and we're going to have to deal with this guy pretty soon.
It's funny. When I remember seeing that when I was a kid, it's trying to scare the player, and not scare like creepy scare, but just scare as in like, you're going to have to deal with this thing. This is coming up. But I was extremely excited because I felt more than anything, just the design of this boss and how the CGI cutscene brought it to life just looked amazing. And the CGI continues to impress here. So I may die in this fight, but this thing is badass, and I can't wait to face it.
It's among the best visuals on the PS1, man. It just is. So we head back to that adjunct TA research lab, and we find Maeda in there. I wrote he gives us a special fun. He gives us a special gun that was made at the station. It has 1 attack power. We are not going to be using this for a while, but he tells us some interesting news. It turns out in the freezer he found a blood serum that belonged to Maya, and it was labeled Eve. And this kind of we're slowly having all of our suspicions confirmed here. He also tells us that Klomp was conducting experiments on sperm to create some without mitochondria, no parasite, as it were, within. And he would willingly, not willingly, he would inseminate willing participants at the hospital with this. Fucked up shit. I mean, this this game does get into some body horror stuff that's like, if you sit and think about it for a minute, it gives me the willies.
Yeah, 100%. It's easy to just kind of gloss over if you're just kind of staying surface level with the narrative, but what has to be done here to achieve the results that Clamp is kind of going for and how it's impacting these individuals and things like that, it's dark and it's very adult if you let yourself go down that road. And I would venture to think if my mother ever knew what this game was about, she would have never let me buy this game.
Oh, absolutely. It's one of those things, like, you don't think about it as much when you're younger, and like even through my 20s, stuff like this didn't bother me. But now that I'm older, I mean, I'm not even that old. I'm 30. I'm turning 31 in a couple months. And it's like, thinking about this kind of thing really makes my hair stand on end in a way that it never used to. And I think that's just like acceptance of my mortality. I don't know.
Yeah, something along those lines. I feel the same way. I just turned 39, and I started feeling those things a few years back myself too. So yeah, there's something about how this is all written. You can completely gloss over it if you really don't want to get into the nuance of it, but if you do, there's a lot here.
Oh yeah. Speaking of a lot here, there are more people here than we are expecting, because out of nowhere, Klomp shows up. And he gets his little supervillain monologue here. We try to arrest him, and he's like, why recite these meaningless laws that only apply to humans? Humans are no match for the true mitochondria, et cetera, et cetera. And he tries actually to attack us with a scalpel. Aya is kind of like frozen. She doesn't, understandably so. I mean, this is a tricky situation. And I'm just going to read exactly what I wrote in my notes. All caps. Out of nowhere, Daniel with the right hook. I don't know where Daniel comes from. He just he shows up and just right hooks Klomp right in the jaw and knocks him out cold. It's so detective movie. I love it.
It was perfect. Aya is kind of frozen with trying to process what Klomp is saying and the fact that he's moving towards her, and just like whack. Out of nowhere, the crowd goes wild, and I think I even whooped a little bit too. It was great.
It's really cool. Once Klomp regains consciousness, he explains that Eve's sister failed because the minute amount of paternal mitochondrial DNA caused a rebellion. So that's why he's been studying sperm with no mitochondria DNA in it. Again, the note that I have under this says, I've been firmly in the, quote, just enjoy the ride and don't think too hard about this, unquote, for a while now. So, I mean, that's just how it is.
Yeah, agreed.
Clomp out of nowhere, he explains all this to us and he yells out to Eve saying that he's ready, and he immediately combusts. Maeda and Daniel, thankfully, jump out of the window to avoid getting burnt too. Aya stays behind, and she's talking to Clomp as he's dying. I wrote down some of the dialogue here. Clomp says, "Why stay to save me?" And Aya says, "I'm a cop. It's my job. But also, I'm a human." like the writing in this game is not great.
Or it's the best writing ever. But no, I always chuckle when we get to that point. Like, it's so cinematic that Clomp is going to sacrifice himself to try to take out Eve's enemies to allow her to do whatever the hell she's trying to do right now. But yeah, it's cheesy. It's so cheesy.
Yeah. This is where we start to fight the T-Rex, the Triceratops, and more as we're looking for Eve. They're really fun fights. I mean, they're not crazy difficult if you're properly leveled and using your equipment right, but it is a lot of fun. Up top in the museum, which might take you a while because, again, this place is confusing, we get to this room covered in biomatter. And on the other side is Eve. She's about to give birth. I'm just remembering this scene. This might actually be my favorite cutscene in the game. It is just dripping with atmosphere and also biomatter. It is so creepy. Eve is fully pregnant now. Her breasts are out, but she does not have nipples or anything like that. The bottom half of her is just completely mutated. And when we barge in, we raise our gun to Eve, and she brings her finger to her lips as if to say, "Hush now." It is so creepy. This is so cool. I love this scene.
Yeah, you did a really good job of describing it, but it's definitely one of those things that you have to see and definitely experience in that moment. I was genuinely creeped out at this point when I played this as a kid. It's just seeing her there, just completely attached to whatever wall she's attached to, and how she's mutated and evolved, and her belly is just overflowing with this baby that's about to be. It was uncomfortable, it was icky, it was foreboding, and just very, very cool. She looks grotesque.
It's really good. And that touch of her raising her finger to her lips to shush us, that's a very maternal thing to do. Like, mothers will do that to their children. And to have Eve do that to us, it implies this power dynamic. Like, we can tell that Eve is just kind of messing with us. Like, she does not yet see Aya as a true threat. It's really cool. We approach Eve, though. You guys have some back and forth. You talk a little bit with her. But all of that slime biomatter stuff at this point shoots out of the sewers and up through the manhole covers and turns into this golem. Like picture Voltron, but guts and blood and guts and entrails.
I don't know how you felt about this, Rick, but I like this scene. I like how it was animated and everything kind of came up out of the sewers and formed into this mass. But going from the scene that we just described and how atmospheric it was to a biomass Gundam, it took me a little bit out of it, just a smidge. But that's me. I don't know how you felt.
This is the turning point in this game where everything after is pure early 90s action movie.
100%. You were right.
Everything, dude. And one scene in particular actually had me laughing out loud, in my chair. It's very good. We meet up with Daniel and Maeda outside, and we get another info dump here. Those pills that Melissa was taking, that she was noting in her diary that Aya kind of crudely called her a drug addict. Those were immunosuppressants. Those were the pills. And when she was in the hospital, Melissa, she received a kidney transplant from Maya after Maya had died in the car accident. I didn't know that kids that young could donate organs, but that's neither here nor there. Clamp was the one who did the transplant. So Eve's cells were already present in Maya's kidneys. So Maya was housing the original Eve. She was the original host, or at least the original host as far as this game and this story is concerned. So Clamp was giving Melissa immunosuppressants so her body wouldn't reject Eve's cells. He wasn't complicit in this. He was an active participant. He was helping Eve take over the host body. I'm getting goosebumps right now. This is giving me the heebie-jeebies.
Yeah, the idea that all of this planning and all of this prep went into this, and I get the impression that Melissa had really no idea what was actually happening to her, and I could see how Clamp was misleading her, and I'm sure trying to assure her, I can help you, take these, we'll get through this kind of thing. All the while she's being cultivated and just bred for what's eventually going to happen to her. Like, just thinking back about this woman whom we don't know anything about really, other than that Melissa really loved opera. I mean, just her life was forfeit the moment that she met that man.
Well, think back to the diary. I mean, she was so intent and focused on feeling better. She didn't know why she was feeling bad, but feeling better to get the part in the opera. So she was like, what did she say she was going to do? She needs to take all of her pills and just work super hard. So I think Clamp used that against her. He used her drive for perfectionism in her craft to have her not question what she was taking or why she was having these reactions to it. It's such a this is nightmare stuff, man.
It's pure evil, 100%.
Yeah, he's irredeemable. Elsewhere, the Navy has got the okay to authorize helicopter attack. We get more organ music here, which is really terrific. The helicopters go and they're trying to assault this golem, which has moved to the sea. There's a line that we hear later on that Eve wanted to bring this all to the sea because the sea is the sort of mother of life. I think that's a very Japanese sort of way of looking at it. It's fine. It's whatever. But the helicopter's missiles, they're not effective at all at this, what did you call it? Biomass Gundam.
Yes.
They actually end up getting redirected back into the pilots, to the helicopters, which obviously kill the pilots. So it's at this point that a couple of pilots come to grab us. They say, we need to accompany you to our aircraft carrier. So they take you, along with Daniel and Maeda, to the Nimitz, which is like their aircraft carrier. And they lay this situation out to Aya. And again, total 90s action movie. They want Aya to pilot a helicopter to get in close to destroy Eve / the creature before it gives birth. She's the only one who can do this because she won't combust. She immediately says, well, I can't fly a helicopter. And they say, oh, don't worry, it's autopilot. Total action movie stuff, man.
Yeah, part of me really likes what they're doing here because the music is so intense and you're getting really into the idea that we're coming to the end. We got to find a way to make this work. But at the same time, we just got to get the plot happening. So just jump in this helicopter. We'll figure it out from there. And it suspended a little bit of disbelief for me too. But I was vested at this point. Get in a damn copter. Let's go.
Oh, for sure. And she's hesitant a little bit, but she does accept. It's pretty grim too, because there are other pilots that go with her that act as diversions. So they're essentially flying to their death just, so Aya could get close. It's really bleak shit.
It really is, and it really adds to the scene itself when Aya realizes that in the CGI cutscene, you can see the helicopters getting in a single file formation so that they can get her where she needs to go. But part of me always wondered why they even needed to do that in the first place. I understand they're drawing fire from her, but I don't know. It's such a needless loss of life. It was very bleak, as you say.
Yeah. Again, this is just action movie stuff from here on to the end. And speaking of that, we get a peak action scene here. Aya gets close enough. She launches a rocket from the helicopter, and it blows the head off of the monster. It is, and like we see it in profile. The music cuts out. It's total action movie. The aftermath and all the goop that kind of explodes topples the Statue of Liberty, which is sort of like a clear symbol that we're not done here quite yet. Or at the very least, normalcy will never be again. But, you know, we're not done here, it turns out. We still have more to go. Because from the ground, from the goop that's on the ground now, a new kind of giant version of Eve is born. So Aya straps on a parachute, and she just jumps out of the helicopter.
Because they don't need that helicopter back. They've already lost enough of them, I guess.
I mean, all things considered, I mean, what's one helicopter, right?
Right. But,
what's one more?
But I did like this scene. Very very actiony. Strap on the parachute, jump out, pull the breech back on your handgun. It was perfect action scene. I'm very invested at this point, as I'm sure you were too.
This is beginning the final set of battles. There's not one final boss so much as there is a series of them. You confront Eve here. She lays out that, you know, the mitochondria have been planning this all along. You know, they've been using the humans to create a perfect biome, a perfect environment for them, so they could one day eventually evolve and claim everything as their own. And humans have served their purpose now. So it's time for Eve to take them out. I made a note here. I'm not going to dwell on it. But it's amazing that this works here better than it does in some of Square's newer releases. Not naming any names, but...
Yes.
This is where our fight with Eve begins. And this not only will take several stages and phases, but it also goes into the 6th day. The 6th day is just all one boss battle. And that title is Liberation. So let's talk a little bit about these. So, this first stage, you're kind of fighting Eve in 3 parts here. Did you get the ability Liberate at this point?
Yes, and what an ability that is.
Yeah, do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, so as you level up in this game, you unlock more and more Parasite abilities that I can use, but her ultimate Parasite ability is called Liberate, and I think the description of this loosely kind of implies that Aya lets the mitochondria inside of her just take control, and she transforms into this, I think, mostly green form, and all of a sudden she has pigtails, because why not? But this, when you deploy this ability, Aya will repeatedly attack an enemy or a series of enemies. Best way I can describe it, to me, it's a lot like Cloud's ultimate limit break in Final Fantasy VII, the Omni Slash.
Yep.
It's just, she uses up her entire Parasite Energy ability bar and just deals a shit ton of damage. It's incredible.
It's exactly that. Yeah, that's a good pull. This does leave you a little stunned afterwards, but I mean, it made the first 2 stages of this boss fight total easy mode for me. It was one hit plus a couple shots and she was done.
Yeah, this was supposed to be, and maybe this was done for a reason, given what we're going to be facing here soon, but this encounter for me was not difficult, and this was around the time, going back to the bonus point system that we touched on at the beginning of the episode, I had already started dumping bonus points into my weapon, so yeah, this was a cakewalk.
Yeah. And, you know, you might not be at that high of a level to get Liberate here at the end. You might not if you didn't explore or you just, you know, used a guide to get through as quick as possible. It's possible, but it makes this part much easier. And honestly, that's a good thing because of a very frustrating section that I also kind of love that we'll talk about here in a minute. The second form of this fight, Eve just looks significantly more human. I don't really have much to say about it.
Yeah, there's really not much, I think, to add here. I kind of liked how her character looked. The design of it was different up to this point. Maybe it was just seeing Eve differently after we've seen her for the entire game up to this point, but I like the way that she was depicted. But beyond that, nothing too spectacular here.
Yeah. Once you beat her in this form, she kind of melts into the rest of the biomass, and you get a moment on the aircraft carrier to rest, to get some more items, save your game, etc. It's worth noting, too, that Maeda has several times at this point tried to give something to you. At this point in the game, Maeda has given you like 3 good luck charms that do not do anything. They just take up space. So every time he tries to give you something now, Daniel will be like, this isn't the time for that voodoo shit or stuff like that. Like, he shuts him down every time. He doesn't want to hear it. So what happens now is after we get a little rest, it turns out that Eve's uterus is still in the biomass ocean, and out of it is born this ultimate being. It's a giant baby from hell. Like, literally, it's a literal baby. And of course, Aya is going to stay behind to take care of it because she's the protagonist. She's got protagonist brain. This has been established. Everybody knows it. Everybody's been saying it. She has protagonist brain. Maeda, at this point, is trying again to give us something, and Daniel just shuts him down. And this diversion is about to pay off. I think it's really clever. But Maeda and Daniel, they escape by helicopter because they would combust otherwise. So we are facing Eve once again. The ultimate being, really. And this one has many more phases to it.
Yeah, depending on how you like your final bosses, this is going to be the best boss fight in the entire game, or it's going to drive you crazy. Because, yeah, these multiple forms, as you continue to battle this creature, it will actually continually evolve, and it will grow out of being a baby into what looks to me like a young child, and then into a young adult, and the battle changes as these forms change, and on the surface, I really liked that as a player, and I liked the progression from one to the other, but as that creature continues to grow, the battle continues to get more and more difficult, more moves you have to learn and avoid, and it's pretty intense, and I'm not gonna lie, I really, really like it.
I like it too. I like it a lot too. My frustrations come a little bit with the next section, but just to get through this battle, the first 3 phases, like you mentioned, the baby is going through phases of life. Baby, adolescent, and then kind of mature adult. Those phases, you just gotta fight it. You gotta shoot it, keep yourself alive, use liberate, and this becomes super easy. But on the phase 4, I suppose I should say, it turns into like it's not another stage of life. It morphs into like a green stingray kind of looking thing.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to describe it. It's I think kind of translucent as well, but it loses all of its mobility, and it's slow to move and kind of methodical. And I think you're going to get to this, but one of the key defining features about it is it starts to take next to no damage from Aya's attacks. I think you do all of 1 hit point of damage anytime you try to shoot it. So now it's what's happening here? You're kind of thrown off at this point. You're really not sure what to do here.
Yeah, all you can do is just shoot it a couple of times until the game throws you into the next cutscene. You can't hurt it. But the next cutscene comes, and it's in the helicopter, and Maeda finally speaks up. He finally gets the guts to stand up for himself, and he tells Daniel what he's been trying to give to Aya. Look, this is going to sound ridiculous. I swear to God, this is true. They are bullets with Aya's cells in them. Because why not? Action movie of the 90s. Action sci-fi.
Right. The protagonist needs protagonist bullets to be able to defeat the evil nemesis.
What's even more action movie is Daniel doesn't question it. He doesn't question anything. He just says, "Oh, that's what you've been trying to do? Give him here." He grabs them and he he jumps out of the plane, and we see this CG. Daniel's falling through the atmosphere. He starts to burn up once he gets close enough to Eve, and we get this really dramatic shot of him throwing the bullets to Aya, and she catches them right as Daniel falls into the ocean. I was laughing so hard because this is so silly and cool and fun. It's just so cheesy. I loved it.
I can't even add to that. You nailed every point of this entire interaction. Like, I'm pumped at this point. It was so well done, and the CGI animation made it that much better. Just mwah.
But now that we've got these bullets with Aya's DNA, they do 999 damage every time. Like, they do the limit of damage. And it still takes you a little bit, but you do end up killing the thing. But it's not over yet. Because now comes the part that I simultaneously really, really love and find it to be a little bit of a miss in terms of design. The thing is now chasing us, like in a horror movie. First of all, the music here is incredible. It is really tense, really low piano, heavy ostinato. It's really, really good. This thing moves really slowly, but if it catches you, game over. You'll lose. And that's the issue that I have with this is, okay, so I knew this was coming. So for this part, I was using a walkthrough because I knew I didn't want to get a game over here. Because if you do, you have to go through all of those fights that we just talked about over again. The cutscenes aren't skippable. The dialogue's not skippable. It's a really weird choice. And it's a bit of a middle finger, too, because you have to run in to the sort of inside of the aircraft carrier, and there's a phone there where you can save. But if you try, you realize the lines are down, and that dialogue takes just long enough to basically ensure that the ultimate being will get you, and you'll get a game over. That's not cool. I don't like that.
No, I don't either. It's funny. I never went for that phone because I had always assumed it was a trap. So you saying that reaffirmed my suspicions of over all these years. But if it's not been overly evident, dear listener, as you've been listening to Rick and I talk about this wonderful game for however many hours it's been cumulatively, I love this game. I love it. But this part right here, as you describe it, is the one negative I have about this game, and I cannot get over it, because I still remember when it caught me when I was making my escape. Because I'm hopefully going to describe this correctly. I'm going completely off memory here. So as you're running through the aircraft carrier, you're trying to get to the engine room, and ultimately the goal is to overload it in some way because you can blow up a multi-million-dollar aircraft carrier by the push of a button. But anyway, when you're going through, you have no map, really. There's a very quick glimpse of a map by the phone, but you really don't have a lot of time to commit it to memory, really. So as you're going down these hallways, the ultimate being, it starts out slow, but it starts to get faster. And if you make one wrong move, one slip up, you are done. But what I remember, and correct me if I'm wrong or if you remember differently, as you go from room to room, scene to scene, and you get to different areas, when Aya would leave, say, she goes into the next room at the top of the screen. She'll start at the bottom of the next screen. So I got into the habit of pressing my directional button continually in the area or the direction that I was going to make sure that as soon as that scene came back up, she was already on the move in the direction she was supposed to go. With the exception of the very last hallway, I think I came into it from the left, expecting to continue from the right, and it was the opposite, or something happened, and I found myself behind a door and stuck. And then by the time I got myself out of it, the ultimate being was there, caught me, and goddamn was I pissed.
Oh, that would have been the end for me. I would have just YouTubed the ending. That would have infuriated me. I didn't clock that. My strategy, I mean, again, I was using a guide, but as soon as the scene would fade in, I would pause just so I could like quickly look around a little bit.
Oh, that's smart. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't clock the patterns like you did, to be honest. But you are right. We're trying to get to the boiler room because we can blow up a ship with the press of a button, basically. And that's just what we do. We're able to hit that button. You have to run past the ultimate being, which scared me a little bit. I was trying not to touch it. But you are able to climb out and jump into the water right at the right time as the ship blows up behind you. It's total action movie stuff. And presumably, we're all done. After this, we meet up with Maeda and Daniel, and they tell us some new information that we may have already guessed, but maybe not exactly as it turns out to have happened. Here's what I mean. Wow, my notes are full of typos here. Maya is inside of us. When we were 7, when Aya was 7, Maya's cornea was implanted into us because we had some kind of a birth defect. So somehow, Eve's mitochondria lived symbiotically with Aya's nucleus. They don't explain it. Maeda gives this speech afterwards about how like humans are the real parasites to the earth. In 2023, this is such a huge cliche that I just roll my eyes. But, you know, in the mid-90s, this maybe wasn't as obvious and played out and trite as it is here. But, you know, it is what it is. But we've had Eve cells in us all along. Obviously, that's how we, you know, didn't combust. That's how we use our powers. How they manage to symbiotically live with us rather than parasitically, it's not really explained, at least not in this game. So we watch the sunrise, all 3 of them together, and the scene fades. But it's not the last one. We do have one more scene. And I don't know. What do you think about this last scene, man? I'm mixed. I'm mixed on it.
I can take it or leave it, I think. I think if you never see this last final scene, and the last thing you see is this scene with Aya, Daniel, and Maeda overlooking the ocean, you can leave this experience fulfilled. However,
fulfilled, if not a bit cliche.
Agreed.
Let's be honest.
Agreed. But there's just one more piece to the puzzle. If you really want to put this whole thing together in the true way it was supposed to end.
Well, not quite. There is one more regular ending scene before we get that true ending.
Oh, it's funny. I'm sticking so close to your notes, I forgot about the final opera scene. Holy shit, it's been a long-ass day.
Yeah, that's what I meant when I said I'm mixed on it.
Awesome. Okay, so yeah, let's go back to that part.
So here's what happens. It's the final scene. Everybody goes to the opera together. Well, okay. I guess the opera's still going on. It's the same opera. It's the same scene, actually, that we began with. And Aya's there, Daniel's there, Maeda's there, and Ben is there. It's kind of funny. Ben and Daniel like go to the bathroom, and Maeda is sitting next to Aya, and he tries to confess his feelings to her. But little Ben, you know, he's just a kid. He doesn't know any better. He like runs up. He pushes Maeda out of the way to sit next to Aya. He's like, yeah, no, I sit next to Aya now. And it's, you know, it's fine. It's whatever.
It's cute. I like that they try to give just a little bit more character moment to Maeda, I suppose. But I was still always kind of put off a little bit that despite everything that happened, they're going to go back to the one place where it all began, and probably the most horrific thing that Aya specifically has seen in her entire life happened there. But whatever. It's neither here nor there.
Well, one could argue that it was fated to be this way, because what we see here, it's the same opera scene, and once the female lead starts singing, you know, thinking back to the sotto voce example, you know, our mitochondria is now back into the opera. It's back into the grander cell. You would think things are okay. But once she starts singing, we get one by one, we see the eyes of Aya, of Daniel, and of Maeda. They turn red. And then we get a pullback. The camera pulls back, and we see the whole audience, and one by one, everybody's eyes are lighting up red, signifying, I think, that Eve lives on. And ultimately, we didn't accomplish our goal. And this is also sequel bait, of course.
Yeah.
And then we get our credits.
Yeah, that's how I took it. And I think I've read that there's a couple different theories as to why it is that maybe Eve doesn't live on and Aya is actually the one that's taking more so control, but she doesn't quite realize what she's capable of, or this, that, or what have you.
Oh, really?
But, yeah, it's I've read a couple different dispositions one way or another, but I kind of took away from it what you described, that at the end of it all, because Eve has been inside Aya this entire time, the mission's not complete. Eve still has a way to take over, and yes, there will be another game. Spoiler alert, there was, but at that point, yeah, big sequel bait, as it were.
Yeah, and I'm a little, I don't know if it works for me or not. Like I prefer this to the, watching the sunset ending, I think, but I don't know. Going to the opera seems a bit on the nose, like you said, and I don't know. I'm just not sure. Maybe if I play Parasite Eve 2, I'll feel differently, because it could be they're setting up something really cool and I just don't know about it yet. But I'll have to play through Parasite Eve 2 and then the notoriously bad Third Birthday, which is part 3. But we do have the true ending to talk about. And as I understand it, you have gone through and got this in the past. I have not. So if you want to talk about the Chrysler Tower, please, by all means.
Yeah, so I don't remember the specifics really of that final scene, but I'll try to recant them as best I can. But once you complete the game, you can save your file and you'll get access to, I believe it's called EX Game. It's basically a new game plus. There's a point we didn't touch on this, there's a point on the aircraft carrier before we do the battle with the ultimate being, where Wayne, who is working the gun shop inside the police station, will ask Aya if he wants to engrave her name on 2 pieces of her equipment, one of her weapons or whatever pieces of armor. I actually tried to put her name on it, but all it does is just change the name of the weapon. But yeah, it was a little weird. I didn't quite understand the why behind this, but the why really is, whatever 2 items you do this to, weapon and armor, will carry over to your New Game Plus. And when you start the very first day in New Game Plus, Aya will have that weapon and armor either equipped or in her inventory. So that's awesome. It rewards that progression, and you can keep building on your weapon and armor choice, which is awesome. But the Chrysler building is now a new location that's on the world map that's accessible the moment you get access to the world map. Now, what the Chrysler building is, I believe it's a 77-floor dungeon. And every 10 floors that you go up the Chrysler building, you encounter a boss creature of some sort. Each 10 floors, there's no save points. Only once you complete the boss every 10 floors, then you can save your game or leave the building or do what you have to do. The incentives for going through this I think it's a randomized dungeon. Every floor has unique items and weapons that you can only get in this building, so you can continue to find better weapons, different items, and things like that. But if you can make it all the way, and I highly recommend that you wait until the end of day 5 before you attempt this, because it gets hard very fast. If you can make it to the end of the Chrysler building, you will discover the game's true ending, in that Eve was not the main antagonist in this game all along, really. You get to the top of the 77th floor, and if I remember right, inside this black-brown cocoon thing is Maya, Aya's sister. And she talks about how she, being the true mitochondrial Eve, stashed herself away in the event that Clamp's plans with Melissa and Eve ultimately failed, and they weren't able to see the birth of the ultimate being and see their plans through. The purebred would remain hidden away to try again another day. So this initiates some conversation between Aya and Maya, and eventually a battle ensues. This battle is hard as fuck, because she deals a lot of damage, and depending on how you've leveled yourself up to this point, you may not be able to take her on toe-to-toe. If you have a lot of the revives items on you and you perish, you're going to need those to bring yourself back and continue the fight. Your Liberate Parasite ability is really going to help you here to deal a bunch of damage all at once, but it's very tough. And if you can best Maya in this battle, you get a little bit of an expedition dump as to what happened, I think, on the day that Maya transplanted some of her cornea into Aya, or at least the events leading up to that. They kind of reconcile as sisters. But what happens at the end kind of throws me off a little bit. Aya says something along the lines of she feels that she's free of Eve now, and she's as she was before all the events of this game even happened. She walks out of the Chrysler building, and then that's the end of the game. The game ends right there, and the credits roll. And apparently that is the true way that this game ends.
So just a couple of things real quick. I didn't read it as Maya was the true antagonist. What I thought was happening was that it was Eve, but this was the original Eve that was taking Maya's body. So Maya is the host, and we could see this because Eve lets us talk to her. And it's honestly, it's a really touching and sad moment when Aya gets to talk to her dead sister. And all her dead sister keeps saying is like, where's my mom? Where's Aya? I've got to get home. Who are you?
Yeah.
And it's really sad, but I took it to mean that like that was the original Eve. That we are meeting them now here. And the rest were just other cells of Eve that had mutated, because they're kind of like a collective being. And what it looked like happened was that Maya retained some kind of control, and was able to somehow smother Eve out. I don't quite know. That's just what it seemed like to me, because this is all taking place inside of Maya's subconscious. Like, we can hear Eve and we can hear Maya. They're talking at the same time, but eventually, like, Maya just keeps saying, I have to get home, and then they both snuff out before Aya then says, like, oh, I feel free now.
That's right. I remember that now. There was a very intense struggle, and you're right. It was touching, and it was almost a little disturbing too. This little girl having no idea really where she's at and why she is, really struggling so hard to try to understand, and Aya's just trying her best to call out to her. It was pretty intense.
Yeah, it's a really nice sort of homecoming kind of scene, if not, like, it's really bittersweet. But here's my question to you. So I didn't do this. I watched a playthrough of it. And after Aya says that, after she says, okay, I feel normal again, like I did before all this happened. Things are, taken care of. Eve is suppressed for now. Maya is at peace. As she leaves, there's a giggle, a high-pitched, like, young girl giggle. I don't think the YouTuber that did this would have just inserted that. I mean, it's possible, I suppose. Do you remember that happening?
I do remember that happening. I'd forgotten it happened until you mentioned it. But yes, that happened. It's that same giggle malicious. That happens on day one when Aya jumps in the hole at the back of the stage and sees the apparition of her sister for the first time. That giggle was the same one.
Shit. Holy shit, you're right. Oh, wow. Yeah, that is the same. It's the same sound. So that is that's pretty creepy. And that this is canonically, this is the ending to Parasite Eve 1. Whether or not you want to go through the 77 floor gauntlet, that's really up to you. I feel okay having just watched it on YouTube personally. But that's the case, then it's what a pull. It kind of pulls the rug out from under you at the very last minute. You think that you have, Maya can now rest in the eternal afterlife successfully. Eve is gone. Aya has survived. But then they throw that last little giggle in, and then you don't know what to think anymore. Because it's not a polite giggle. Like, it sounds mischievous. It sounds puckish is not the right word. It's up to no good.
Absolutely. It excited me even further because I already knew that there was going to be a sequel based on how the game ended the first time you played it. But at this point now, there's certainly more story to be had here, and what we think is done is certainly not done.
And that's Parasite Eve. And maybe we certainly could have done this in one episode, but I'm glad we didn't. I'm glad that we split this up so we could just have some more room to kind of talk about how we felt about things. A little more breathing room, less rushed. I think this was good.
Yeah, I agree. This game itself, I think when I first completed it, maybe took me all of 7, maybe 8 hours. It's not a very long game, but the fact that we were able to kind of take our time and really talk through the narrative here and some of the gameplay elements, there is a lot to be had here. This game is simple yet complicated and really has a lot of depth, and I'm convinced that we will never have another game like this ever again. This came out during a time where Squaresoft specifically was kind of throwing liberties around with different properties and different types of games, RPGs and different IPs, and they took a chance on this, and I'm so glad they did, and we got to experience this, and I hope gamers out there that are listening to this that haven't played this, give this game a shot, because this is truly a unique experience in every sense of the word, and you'll come away from it just happy that you got to experience it. I get that impression out of you too, Rick. Now that you've played it, I think you're pretty happy that you did.
Oh, 100%. I mean, it's far from perfect, but I loved it. I loved every minute of it. And, I mean, I think my final playtime was 8.5 hours. It is not bite-sized, but it respects your time, which is refreshing after having done 60 plus hours in Final Fantasy 16. That's another conversation. But no, yeah, there probably are other things like this, but I haven't played them, and they certainly weren't around in the 90s. So this is as unique as they come. I agree with you. I think anybody that likes JRPGs, anybody that likes the PlayStation, and anybody that likes like horror thriller, I think you should give this a shot. You know, it's even if you want to play it physically, I mean, it's not an expensive game. I mean, you're going to pay more than $50 for it physically, but you could also download it from the PS3 eShop, I believe. And, emulation is free.
Yeah, oddly enough, the last time I played this, since I purchased it on the PlayStation 3 store, I downloaded it on my PSP Go, for those that know that little gem.
I have one saved on Facebook Marketplace, but it's pending. I really want to get one of those.
You'll love it if you do.
So that's Parasite Eve. Yeah, thanks everybody for sticking around for the, I think total this was like, 3.5 hours-ish? It's pretty good stuff. And I think you should all play it if you haven't. No housekeeping this time. We got all of that out of the way. In the first episode, I do want to suggest all of you to check out Nomad's show, The Retro Wildlands. He gave plenty of recommendations last time. I think I gave a couple too. And it's still, I mean, nothing's changed. I mean, still recommend it. It's still great. As for us, you can still find us everywhere that we said last time. Please check out the Discord. Check out the Patreon. Give us a rating and review if you haven't yet. We really, really appreciate those. And with that, I think we could wrap this up. I think our mitochondria have evolved and they are ready to spring forth.
And I will say, Rick, if they evolve to a point where you want to check out Parasite Eve 2, just give me a holler.
What is that on? Is that PS1?
Yep, that's on PlayStation 1 as well. I can't remember if that's available on the PSN or not, but if you get a chance to play that too. It's a different type of experience compared to Parasite Eve, but I think you'd like to give it at least a shot. And if you want to take it all the way, I'd love to talk about it with you.
Oh, totally, dude. I fully anticipate playing through 2 and 3rd Birthday. I just don't know when that will happen, but it will happen for sure. I'm really into this IP, and I want to see where it goes. Also, this is just, people are probably tuning off by this point. Do you know, is the novel translated into English? Like, my Japanese is not at the point where I could read a novel.
I thought it was. There was a point where I think I was going to purchase it online, Amazon maybe, Kindle, that kind of thing. So I want to say yes.
I think I might like to, because it is technically a prequel to the game. Well, I mean, it's more appropriate to say the game is a sequel to the book, but I want to live in this universe more. As much as it gives me the heebie-jeebies thinking about like the body horror, I'm not done with it yet,
Yeah, someone told me, and I've not confirmed this, so take this with a grain of salt. Someone had told me that they made a movie that I believe is Japanese, subtitled in English, that is available on YouTube somewhere. Someone posted the entire movie, and it's out there to find if you look hard enough for it. So keep that in mind, too.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I knew about the movie. I'll have to check it out.
Sweet.
All right, I think enough people have tuned out by this point that we could wrap it. So, Frank, otherwise known as Nomad from the Retro Wildlands, thank you once again for joining me. It's been an absolute blast. And for all of you listening, thank you for being you and for being here. I am the mitochondria of this powerhouse, Rick Firestone. So, until next time, we'll catch you then.